Brendan, I'm very grateful for you to venture into the history of this small, unusual theatre that not a lot of people would have had the opportunity of going to. So the story of a theatre through 5 programmes. Over to you, Brendan.
Well, thank you very much, Malcolm. So yes, I mean, this is a talk about the Unity. It was active in Somerstown from 1936 through to 75 when it burnt down. And I'm not going to attempt to give you an exhaustive history, but basically what I'm going to try and do is pique your interest a bit, because just as Malcolm was alluding to there, it seems to have got forgotten a bit, and I just think it's worth remembering. So here we go. But first, just a little bit about how I come to be here talking about this. As Malcolm said, I moved to Somerstown about 20 years ago, and I was living in Goldington Street. And walking down the road, I saw that very plaque that he referenced, a theatre run by the people, for the people. Oh, hang on, my slides aren't moving. Okay, there we go. So that was something that appealed to me. Then I thought, I asked my partner, who'd been living here since the 1970s, and she said, yes, there used to be a socialist theatre down there, and it had been a place where many famous people had been, including Lionel Bart. Now, I've got a liking for musicals. I'd heard a lot of stories about Lionel Bart, and so it kind of got me intrigued a bit. How did he come to be here, in this place called Somerstown, which didn't seem to be a very prominent or theatrical place? So I got interested. What did it do? Why did it come to an end? What was it doing in Somerstown? But at the time, I was busy with work and modern life and all that kind of thing, so there wasn't time for me to do anything about it. But I got older, kids moved out, began to iron down a bit, and I got in touch with the Somerstown History Club. And they encouraged me to do a bit more, so here I am. And before I say anything else, I would just like to say thanks to a few people. They've helped me in some ways, and some memories I've plundered. So firstly, Diana Foster and Esther Leslie from the Somerstown History Club, as I say, encouraged me to do this. And Esther in particular, she's given me some top tips. I've never done a talk like this before, so she's given me some top tips. So I hope, if you're listening, Leslie, Esther, I hope you can see that I've made use of them. But also, just to let you know, some hot press news: the Somerstown History Club have now got a premises, 52 Phoenix Road in Somerstown, and are busily working on getting the place ready to open. And when it does open in the spring, the programmes that I'm using here will be housed and displayed there. So it'll be a place to go and actually see them, if hopefully I do in fact pique your interest. Also, I'd like to thank Malcolm for inviting me here, but also he has done a short piece on the Unity, which was helpful. The main source really is a book by Colin Chambers, The Story of Unity Theatre, which is a big and detailed book, very comprehensive. Very hard to get hold of now. I ended up getting mine. It's a second-hand copy that had to come from a library in America. I'm very sad to say no one had ever borrowed it, but there you go. I've had a look at the archives a little bit, spoke with Roger Robinson, a Labour councillor, very active councillor in Somerstown, who some of you may know. And finally, last but by no means least, Harry Landis. He was a director and performer at the Unity, and he's now the Unity Theatre Trust Chair. He very generously donated these programmes and flyers to the museum in Somerstown, and so from that I was able to base this talk. He's a very entertaining chap, got lots of stories to tell, and he also, as chair of the Unity Theatre Trust, he has a DVD of the Unity story. So again, if you're interested, you could probably find out and get hold of those from him. So as I said, I'm not going to give you a comprehensive story of the Unity today.
You have to use the thing to move it around.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm going to do is it's going to be in fact one program and 4 flyers that I'm going to use, part of what Harry generously donated. But I think they're an interesting group of documents, and in some ways they're sort of like a little time capsule in themselves. I hope you can see the print. Some of the print's quite small, so I hope it comes through okay. And I will talk as well and try and highlight certain bits. But first of all, just to give you an idea, these are some themes I've picked out that I'll be referencing as we go through, and that they're sort of relevant to the Unity and how it saw itself and its sense of purpose and the way it went. So it's participation by working people, the presentation of subjects for a working class audience, at the time when it started, the West End, it was very much middle-class productions. And so the origins of the Unity, which I'll talk about in a minute, were very much about trying to do something for working people. Education, the promotion of socialism or communism, the support it has had from influential people. And also these programs are from the 60s, largely the 60s, in fact. And so you also start to see the seeds of the decline of the Unity. First, this is a quote from the program I'll show, You Won't Always Be on Top. And Gogol was a 19th century Russian who satirized, apologies, the Imperial Russian court. And entertaining is seen as a central theme for the Unity, but also they were frequently satirical themselves. And I'll talk later about the fact that it was a club because that enabled it to be more satirical. So, a bit about the history. So the Unity grew from radical theatre groups that appeared after the First World War in Britain and in other countries in response to the political and cultural changes following the First World War, but particularly in Russia. But they also drew on the radical theatre of Weimar, Germany, and it was informed really by the working conditions of people here. Groups were inspired by the Communist Party of Great Britain, and they began to form political plays. And there was a chap called Tom Thomas who helped set up what became known as the Hackney People's Players. And he coined the phrase propertyless theatre for the propertyless class. And that's very much in line with where the Unity was to go. Also, they performed a very successful version of Robert Tressel's famous book, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropists. And you'll see that keeps coming through with the Unity as well. These groups sort of coalesced into bigger organisations. And on the right-hand side here, you can see a couple of adverts. So you've got the Red Players, Red Front, the Hammer and Sickle Troupe. And just to give you an idea of what they were doing, I've sort of highlighted there from the Red Front, a popular South London troupe, always at your service for meetings and socials, one sketch or a dozen. And a lot of what they did was performing things for the people, and formal plays might be difficult to perform where working people went. And also they were very keen that they performed outside factory gates. And what you see at the top there is the Red Megaphones Theatre on the back of a lorry with Ewan McCall performing to an audience in Glasgow of working people. And if you look down to the red stage, that photograph there, again, it's on the back of a lorry, but that's in Germany. That was the Workers' Theatre League in Germany. So it just gives you that international perspective which they had. And I think one of the important things also is that the workers' movement were proponents of agitprop, which was agitating the working population through propaganda. Very good to do that from the back of a lorry, and the Unity continued to do that. And as you will see as you go through, politics are there throughout the life of the Unity, no matter what it was performing. And the associations with the Communist Party are important, and I'll come back later to show you examples of how that carried on right through. But one of the things was that the politics of the Communist Party changed with time, and what you found was that there was a whole range of perspectives on how socialism could be achieved and what theatre could contribute to that. So, you did get to the point where between the war, you'd have the TUC and the Labour Party not trusted because they became part of the capitalist state machinery. Of course, that was between the wars. What happened between the wars was, it was between the wars. In 1933, Hitler came to power in Nazi Germany, and left-wing theatre was suppressed. People like Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill left. And then the US became a centre of theatre. And the Unity tapped into that. Now here you see the cover of a programme for a play called Plant in the Sun. That was about a strike in New York and was quite a famous and successful play. And I don't know if you recognise the guy in the middle, but that guy in the middle is Paul Robeson. He came to play at the Unity rather than the West End, and sounds like he was an incredibly charismatic person, but also someone who really believed in equality. And there's a wonderful anecdote about how he wanted to be like everybody else, so he wanted to sweep up after the performance. But everyone at the Unity got together and said, you can't do that, it will damage your voice. So they wouldn't let him. They said, your voice is your tool, that's what you need to do. And just a little aside, I also heard that apparently Paul Robeson's had more references in the Camden New Journal than the Mayor of Camden. So clearly a famous chap here. But also on the right, I don't know if you will recognize there, but just pointing down to where Robson's, it looks like a box there, that's Alfie Bass, who became much more famous after the war, but he's got lots of connections with the Unity too. So because of its links with the Communist Party, understandably the UK government was suspicious of it. And then when the Germans and the Soviet Union signed their non-aggression pact in 1939, that caused some problems internally for the people of the Unity. You know, what did it mean that the Soviet Union had signed a communist pact with the Nazis? But then, that very soon after that war broke out, there was a role for the Unity in entertaining people. The government actually could see the benefits of working with the Unity, for example, entertaining folks in tube shelters and all that kind of thing, just to try and keep morale going. And then once the Soviet Union entered, they also thought it was useful as a way of helping to educate the British population about the Soviet Union, our new allies, and why we should be with them and working together with them. The end of the war, new Labour government, so a great thing as far as Unity was concerned. And in 1948, I thought it was interesting, they actually organised a conference about state funding for the theatre. You know, we later get the Arts Council. And the contacts with the Soviet Union were kept up, and in one of the programmes you even had the Soviet ambassador writing a piece, and as you will see as we go through, there are references to the Soviet Union in the adverts and things in the programme. But one of the interesting things as well is that Living Newspaper, oh, it's not there, I'll talk a bit more about Living Newspaper shortly, but one of the performances the Unity did was a living newspaper called The World on Edge. And as well as criticising the West for the Suez crisis, it also criticised the Soviet Union for Hungary. And so that created quite a few issues and disputes internally. But not only that, you know, as time went on, the politics were changing and the world was changing, but so was the UK. And the world in which working people lived was changing. And actually, you'd started to get the development of what became known as kitchen sink dramas, which, you know, the Unity was there to present a working class experience for working class people. Kitchen sink dramas started to present that working class experience in films as well as theatres and so on. And, you know, I'll talk a little bit later about the Royal Court, because that's where a lot of that kind of theatre was going. But even so, the Unity stayed true to its roots and produced good material. And it was very active in the St Pancras and Leighton Camden festivals, and in fact won the best drama competition in 1959. So they were still doing good work, they were still very engaged in the politics and the world around them. So that's just to kind of, to try to bring you up to the 1960s, which is where the programs come in. So first of all, I'll go through the program. The first program, You Won't Always Be on Top. I think it's a wonderful document in its own right, really. So in many ways, it's like a normal theatre programme. And from that, you can just get all sorts of tidbits about how the Unity worked and almost actually the times. It's a time capsule in some ways. So, you know, I think this first page kind of tells you something, doesn't it? You won't always be on top, and there's your worker sitting in his means of production, you might say, of his wheelbarrow. Not really hiding the politics. It was actually a musical about life on a building site. So a subject for a working class audience, a play about the building trade. And actually what you found was many people came from the building trade, and apparently quite often from the audience, they would criticize the actors for the way they were doing their job. They were holding the tool wrong and doing things wrong and things like that. Also, this was originally a production by a group called the Theatre Workshop, which was another radical group. And that's something which the Unity would often draw on. They would draw on other theatre groups and work with other theatre groups on their plays and on their productions, and they would adapt and develop them and so on. So, you know, it also helps to show that connection that the Unity had. So if we turn over, as with most theatre programmes, you get some adverts. So I'll give you a bit of time to have a look at this. It's certainly not very professional looking, but I think it is quite interesting. So for example, in the top hand corner, this advert, very relevant to the show. Don't worry if you're not on top, you can go around the world. Well, almost anyway, if you book your holiday with Progressive Tours. Where do they go? Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union and China. So someone advertising holidays abroad, indeed, but abroad to socialist countries. And then at the bottom, you've got topic, British industrial and seafaring folk songs and ballads. there's a strong connection there, I think, with the unity and folk music, which I will come back to as well later on. And, you know, folk music, you know, as it says here, British industrial and seafaring folk songs and ballads, it is workers' music. So again, that's connecting into them. And I don't know about the restaurant or Montmartre, but I guess it was trying to attract the trade from here. So, you know, in a sense, what you could say is, you know, these are left-wing adverts for a left-wing audience. Next, I'd never seen anything quite like this in a program before. And it's a dialogue set in the theatre foyer with Unity playgoers. And it's interesting because it starts to give you some idea of what the Unity is about. So, for example, you know, why you come in, what's all this then? It's put on plays. What you can see plays on the telly. You know, already by this time, 70% of UK households had a television. So, you know, the competition for Unity was also coming from the telly. And then these plays are different. They give you something to think about, you know, that educational role. Well, think about things on the telly, yes, but how long for? 10 minutes to half an hour. I saw a play here 12 years ago and I still think about it now. And that's what it was about. Oh, there we go. The ragged trousered philanthropists emerges already. You know, it is a play which really runs through the Unity's history. And I think, you know, it's true to life. You know, it's reflecting working class experience. And they say, you know, where's it? I want to forget it. Sorry, I've lost it. There we go. So the friend there. But I don't want to think about the building trade. I'm doing it all day. I want to forget about it. And I think to some extent, that's what a lot of people are looking for from entertainment, including me. You know, I like a bit of escapism. And, you know, some people might well argue that actually the proliferation of screen-based entertainment today is a triumph of those in power in order to get people to forget about the challenges in their lives. Anyway, final point from this, from the friend, that's different. You have something to look forward to. That's what I'm trying to tell you about Unity. It makes you feel as though you've got something to look forward to. And I think that's another thing. Come on, let's go. It's worth going. This is where we can see our lives. And in the top corner there, you can see it's written by a chap called Eric Pace. Eric Pace was very heavily involved with the Unity. And I think in some ways, he sort of illustrates the story of people's engagement with the Unity. So at one time, he was a night watchman who was living in a room at the back. But then he wrote for theatre, including The World on Edge that I just mentioned. And also he ultimately became president of the Writers Guild. And I think that's a great way of, you know, going from the back room where you're a night watchman through to actually, you know, encouraged to write, and you get to the point where you're president of the Writers Guild. And at the bottom there, you've just got, you know, the board, I suppose you'd call it, or the board, I'll call it. Okay. Then you get these funny little bits which go right through the program. And this is about, basically, it's talking about what the Unity is trying to do. And again, it really doesn't mix its words. Art and propaganda, we find, mix very well indeed at the beginning of that third paragraph there. That's the roots. And, you know, that's also where the agitprop and the living newspaper comes from. Here's just a little example. Clearly this was between the wars, but, you know, the living newspaper, it was a way of getting points across to people in quite short and succinct ways, you know, a bit like the sketches we saw referred to earlier on. And it was a distinct way of trying to get across particular points about particular things. So, yeah. Yes, the other thing about the living newspapers was that, in fact, because, yeah, basically they were able to be done on the back of a lorry, that was the point. You didn't need drama, you didn't need sets, you didn't need a theatre, so that the newspaper was very flexible. It also, you know, when the Unity was used during the Second World War, for example, by the government, again, that was the kind of thing they do. They could use that model to go out and give messages to the people. So I think there's lots of, you know, the theatre, says Gogol again, is a pulpit in which it is one's duty to educate the audience. We add only this. We try to make the process as enjoyable as possible. And again, I think in some ways that encapsulates what the Unity was about. Behind the mask here, I have no idea who that person is. But again, it's kind of interesting and weird. You're like, what is your greatest hate? Cheese. What is the tagline of your favorite joke? And an elephant. You wonder what the joke was. What is your favorite thing? Studying people. Now you can imagine an actor would really enjoy studying people. Where are we? This, what's the most moving theatrical performance you've seen? Olivier and Hamlet. So it's not that they don't like quality theatre, if you like, or, you know, people like Olivier, what you might consider to be the West End type theatres. You know, theatre there could be good as well, and they could recognise how good that was. But it was the Noel Coward type things where actually that wasn't really for ordinary people. I know it says there now, you probably know who it is, but I don't. And I'm afraid I haven't got the next programme, so I can't give you the answer. Okay. Next, a quote from Shakespeare. You know, just talked about Hamlet there. Here's a quote from Shakespeare from Hamlet. And again, I think it's very much about what the theatre is about. Suit the action to the word and the word to the action. That's in essence what the Unity was trying to do. And then down below, they've got something which comes from the Oxford Companion to Theatre, and it talks about at a time when London theatre was moribund and unentertaining, these amateurs under skilled direction staged productions of the highest quality. They occupy a unique place in the theatrical life of the metropolis. So, you know, this is the Oxford Companion to Theatre. It's no throwaway publication. So I think it really does show how respected the Unity was. And, you know, I'll be talking a little bit more about the support it gets from some quite famous and eminent people. Clearly people around who recognised what it did and did well. I also think, you know, this bit in the middle is quite interesting, the drawings. You know, so just a little bit, but they're showing more of his drawings in the foyer. And although not directly connected to Somerstown, I think it is quite interesting that in Somerstown in the 20s and 30s, there was a big movement and a lot of redevelopment, very influential in terms of social housing. And amongst those people was a lady called Edith Neville, who was one of the key proponents of that. And she was a great person who advocated the benefit of the arts and theatre for people's lives. So I think, you know, art for the people, theatre for the people, put everything up in the foyer, you know, that's all part of the same thing, I think. Sorry, this is a bit of a wonky copy, but I think in some ways this is all very, just these all little snippets at the top. We'll come back to the Soviet Weekly in a moment, but you've got various little bits at the top. So thank you to the students from RADA. So you've got RADA coming and students playing there. Outside broadcast, so this is basically going out on the lorry kind of theatre. And once again, the Ragged Trousers Philanthropists features there. And then we remind our friends that the brightest socials usually include Unity entertainers. Inquiries to so-and-so. So I think at the Unity Theatre bookstall. So there you go. They're saying, look, we can do these things. We can give you fun. Just like earlier on, you know, sketches, that's what they could do, and they could do that well. Now you can act. So they're trying to get people to come into the theatre. And, you know, it's a nursery for working class talent. We want you with us. You can make full use of our club and buy your own tickets. Yeah, they do need to sell tickets too. But I think, you know, again, it's about trying to engage with the local population, get them to come along, and then to Unity members and friends for this, we sincerely invite your remarks, preferably in writing on this issue of the magazine, but strongly urge you to flood us with ideas, contributions, drawing cartoons and adverts, please. We want this to be your magazine, and our effort is only good as to help you help make it. Your views will be embodied in future issues. Yep. So it's very much about engaging with the local people, trying to get them involved and work with them, but also it's drawing that talent into the theatre. Can you write? Can you act? You know, are you a good carpenter? Can you help build sets? Lots of people came in to contribute to the Unity. And in fact, the theatre that was built here at the end of Goldington Street, well, converted, I should say, from an old chapel, it was largely done by unpaid labour from all the people, you know, from trades unions and local workers and so on, coming along to do it all. Then yes, we go to the bottom of the page in the Soviet Weekly. So again, not hiding where its politics lie. Where can I learn more about the Soviet Union? Find answers to questions about Soviet education and family life. Keep abreast about scientific and industrial development. Learn about Soviet opinion. Enjoy first-hand reports. It's very much I'm sure nowadays people would quite say that is very much propaganda. It was very much saying, look, come on, this is the Soviet Union, find out more. You probably heard lots of bad stories. We can try and put them right. Now here, I can't quite see at the top of this. I hope you can see it. But this top piece is actually written by George Lothian, who was the General Secretary of the Amalgamated Union of Building Trade Workers. This was a musical about the building trade. So who do you get? You get the trades union leader to come along and talk about it. And I think that's, again, part of how the unity was able to draw in eminent people, but equally about its engagement with the union. So, you know, you do a play or a musical about building trade, about the building trade, that trades union comes along, trades unions would block book tickets for their members to come along to enjoy the productions that were put on. And that was really crucial in terms of how the unity survived and how it kept going for many, many years, support from the trades unions. And I think this, our secretary reports, and again, I hope you can see some of it, but I do think it's very light-hearted and humorous. And I think it conveys an interesting attitude probably within the unity. You seem to get bits of humor coming through, poking fun at themselves and all that kind of thing. And I think it's really interesting. So anyway, you do get many bits which are devoted to members, explaining about the appeal and so on. And that's going on here as well. So for example, towards the bottom, I cannot end without drawing members' attention to the lottery, dear old Lottie. Yeah, making an important contribution. Also, I mentioned the folk night earlier on, and I will come back to that. But, you know, Wednesday evening folk night is going very well. The bar was packed when I saw it last. It's held every other Wednesday. Just a question of getting the right Wednesday. Again, you know, just a nice little bit of humour, if you see what I mean. So I think that's all. You know, just gives it a nice tone. The next page. Well, I can't read music, I'm afraid, and I can't. Well, I can not really play an instrument, so I've got no idea what this actually sounds like. But I think, you know, people are the players. That conveys a lot. That's, you know, that's in essence what the ethos of the unity was all about. I'm afraid I've got no idea whether it's a good song or not. But, you know, if you look at some of the words, the world will rise, mankind will harmonize, the struggle open eyes for people are the players. Yeah. And I'm afraid I don't know who Bruce Taylor and Trevor Oliver are either, who wrote it. But this, you know, 20th of July 1960, this was just before the play opened, so fresh off the press, so to speak. Excuse me. I'm not sure who wrote this top piece, but it's pretty flamboyant, and it's a call to writing and performing by all. So, to reverence true genius, to value talent, to prize effort and to appreciate criticism. One day soon, perhaps, to discover modern industries, Shaw or Shelley or Shakespeare, the herald of the newest world. You know, that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to help your ordinary person have a go at writing, see how they get on, get help to do it more, get something performed and see how they develop. And as you can see, the bottom line there, beginners please, you know, they want people to come. At the bottom, it's a piece by George Bernard Shaw. And in essence, what he is doing is he's arguing that a person's beliefs must influence their writing or performance, and so recognizing that it is seen as honorable. So in essence, I think what it's trying to say is that the unity as a theatre and production group with honor, that because it wears its sleeve, its politics on its sleeve all the time for everyone to see. It doesn't hide that, and so it's a very honorable way of performing. And I think it's quite interesting just to include that there. Again, probably educational too. Now then, we had the dialogue before, we've come back to it now, so this is after. So again, unity players in the foyer. So you're off then, and as we go down, I I don't know, I'm still thinking about it. What did I tell you? It made me laugh and all, but what? I'm thinking of other people down our way. Most of them would sooner sit back and watch Maverick or Dotto or something. Don't take so much effort. And again, it's the television. Just, you come in, you're tired. Why would I want to go out and be thinking? Then must have taken a lot of effort to build this back in 1936. Someone must have bothered then. And then I think this is a really interesting line. Things were different back in 1936. Most of the things we were after then we've got now. And I think that, talking about seeds of decline, I think that's kind of showing that actually a lot had happened in terms of, you've got the Labour government in 1945, you've got the NHS, you've got the welfare state. Trades unions were much more powerful and living and working conditions were much better. Council housing had been built. Things were a lot better than they had been before the war, back in 1936. I just say, in some ways, I think these two pieces encapsulate why the audiences fell off. People are wanting to watch the telly. Lives are a lot better, so they don't necessarily want to think. That's why people don't want to think too much. Perhaps that's why they should. And I like that, again, a bit of a joke. You can tell them that till you're blue in the face, red in the face, because he's a socialist. And then next, I was bringing a couple of mates along. Yeah, great. So they're trying to get people to come along. So, it just kind of illustrates how there was a battle going on, if you like, to get people to come out to go to the theatre and to go to a workers' theatre that was promoting socialism, when actually a lot of working people by then had better living conditions, better paid jobs, a national health service and so on, better housing, and a telly. You can just sit in front of the telly and watch Z Cars. So I think, that's the kind of thing that was going on that the Unity was having to fight against. And also just at the bottom, it wants people to get involved. So it's saying this is what we're considering doing. So if you're interested in any of these things, do come along, get in touch. Well, I mentioned Soviet Union and Hungary would keep coming up. Again, I think this is a very interesting thing. Do you look blank when someone mentions Hungary? Be well informed and up to date by joining the British-Hungarian Friendship Society. So again, it's trying to move on. 1956 was Hungary, so this was 1960. So it's still an issue, and they're still trying to promote a more communist perspective. And I mentioned about the living newspaper World on Edge, which Ian Pace had co-written. And as I said, both Suez and Hungary were referred to in there, but both of them were criticised. And because of the nature of the way that the Unity worked and the living newspaper, they put out questions to the audience. Where are any of us going? I don't know. Do you? And apparently it played to packed houses, often followed by a discussion. Communist Party were furious, apparently, including so angry they stopped paying their subs that year. So that was obviously a bit of a problem. And, in my head, I wonder, well, actually, was the Unity trying to curry favour again with the Communist Party? They needed support from that group of people. Is this a way to try and get it back by actually saying, look, we'll advertise it and talk about Hungary that no one wants to speak about? That bottom cartoon, I've got no idea why Churchill's there. I'll be honest with you. He's been a bricklayer, it's a building trade play, but don't know what he's doing there. But yeah, see that? Oh, maybe he was Prime Minister then? No, he must have been too old. Anyway, but yeah, the joke is, I'd like to see that bloke's union card, but he's clearly not a union member or a bricklayer. Then finally, the back page, the bar again. But here, actually, it's not just saying come to the bar, but it's saying we've redecorated it. So come along, bring your friends, your voices and your thirsts, no charge for admission. So basically, the bar, I guess, is a place where you can make money, and they need to make money. And so they've refurbished that, and they're trying to get more people to come along. Now, whether they'll be singing and dancing on the tables in those medieval outfits, I don't know. But, the idea is to get people there. So now one of the flyers. So on the 25th of September, 1962, they launched an appeal to buy the freehold of Goldington Street, which at that time would have cost the princely sum of £5,500. The idea being to build a new theatre and include in that rehearsal space and another auditorium. And the slogan for the appeal was theatre with a history, theatre with a purpose, theatre with a future. The appeal was very successful, and he got £20,000. But didn't go without argument. I guess another thing about the Unity is there were always internal arguments. And some people complain, I mean, not on this program here, but people like Dickie Henderson, who you may remember, Frankie Howard, David Frost, they all took part in productions to help raise money for the Unity. Apparently David Frost was demanded a fee, but eventually rescinded. But so there were disagreements about sort of going a bit too mainstream commercial, but also there were disagreements about how to spend the money. Do you get a new theatre, or do you make changes to the Goldington site and what was there? It was decided to stay there with the existing site, but when they went out to tender for proposed improvements, that came to a total of £90,000, 20,000 being a bit short of that, so it was way beyond their reach. But the Unity did keep getting support from a whole range of local authorities. 14 councils had contributed to that appeal. And St Pancras Council had been very much an advocate for Unity and were involved later at the end as well. And also, I've mentioned the unions. Support from those unions was very important. And in essence, what you hear there is, generally speaking, a lot of the engagement of the Unity was national and international. So they drew plays internationally, but also they drew funding nationally. And it wasn't really until the late 60s, early 70s that you seemed, as far as I could make out, to get more engagement with the local community in Somerstown. And you've got a thing called the Crowndale Kids Club, and they also took part in the Somerstown Festival. Just a little bit more about, I mean, I guess if you looked at this flyer now, you'll have seen some names that you'll recognise: David Kossoff, Cleo Lane, Alfie Bass, who we saw earlier on. I don't know if any of you remember John Slater, who was in Z Cars, actually, as I mentioned. Johnny Dankworth, Sir Lewis Casson, Lionel Bart, Sybil Thorndike. I mean, she was on the editorial board of the Daily Worker, which I'd never realised. So lots of very influential people there. And I don't know if you can see the prices of the seats. So here, I think unreserved seats, 5 shillings, reserved seats, 7 and 6. The most expensive ticket was 15 shillings. Now, the Unity itself, the highest price seat was always 10 shillings. But just to give you an idea, a West End show at that time would cost around £10. So a huge difference in costs. Inevitably, different audiences they attracted. So yes, so there's Alfie Bass and all of those people. It wasn't enough to buy everything. It didn't have the £90,000, but you'd got the £5,000. And so therefore, the Unity was able to buy the freehold to Goldington Street. But struggling with audiences, as we've already referred to, getting less and less union subscription, it meant that basically the Unity was going from hand to mouth. That you, in lots of the programmes, just as there was in this one, references to the appeal and needing to raise money and would you like to employ us to come and entertain your party and so on. This one, Old Time Music Hall. Now, when I first saw this, I've got to say, I thought, Old Time Music Hall, socialism. But actually, if you think about it, the music halls and later variety theatres were actually a working class entertainment. It's where songs like My Old Man and Father Dear Father come from, about avoiding the rent collector and the perils of drink. So they were very much a working class entertainment and working class theatres. And if you look, where are we? Performances at 11:15. So people will be coming out the pubs at that time. So think, oh, okay, that's interesting. Come out to, the other thing is, if you notice, it's Saturday night, so you haven't got work the next day, so therefore people might stay up. I don't know if the bar was open at the Unity, by the way, but well, we'll see. The other interesting thing here is it's devised by Reginald Wagland. Reginald Wagland and Pat, his wife, they were practitioners of improvisation. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how it would go down with a slightly tipsy audience doing Old Time Music Hall. But the Waglands, they would later cause some problems because there was riotous behaviour outside the theatre following their very anarchic and improvised programmes. But, one of the interesting things, an Lionel Bart musical called Wally Pone, based on Volpone, which was a satire on 60s Soho, there was an internal review of that, and there was a comment in that about the musical was always poorly attended, and audience seemed to want the Old Time Music Hall more. So it was clearly popular. Also, I mentioned earlier on about kitchen sink drama. Well, Arnold Wesker, don't know if you'd call him kitchen sink, but he was certainly a working class playwright. And as you can see, this is coming after a performance of that. So Wesker was he wrote plays for working people, about working people's lives, Chicken Soup with Barley, that's that one, yes, but also Roots, I'm talking about Jerusalem, Chips with Everything is probably his most famous one, which is about national service. Anyway, he took his plays to the Royal Court rather than the Unity, which I think showed how things were moving. He was a working class writer for working people, but he went to the Royal Court and not to the Unity, which perhaps 30 years before that he might have done. Part of the reason was that there you had someone called George Devine, who was connected to the Unity, and he was a founder of the English Stage Company. He was the artistic director there. And they had similar ideas to the Unity in terms of what they thought theatre was about. And many people who were part of the English Stage Company had roots and connections to the Unity, like George Devine. Also, just a little note, because you can see directed by Harry Landis. Harry was, as I've mentioned already, an actor, writer and director, and currently chair of the Unity Trust. I mean, he's known nowadays possibly best for his roles in EastEnders and also Friday Night Dinner. He became president of Equity for 6 years, and as I said, has been invaluable for help with me. The other thing, I referenced earlier the folk club. That regular folk club was also very popular, and they would attract leading performers from that, including Pete Seeger. He came along. Next, Jack and the Beanstalk, a political pantomime. So again, there's no disguising what this is going to be about. The Unity was famous for political pantomimes. It had done them over many years. They included sketches and songs that satirized the politicians. And in the 60s, that was getting more popular. They were doing it long before that. And one of the things that I've added here is the thing about theatre membership. And because the Unity was a theatre club, it enabled it to avoid the peering eyes of the censor, the Lord Chamberlain's department. So therefore, they could get away with doing the satire. And they very famously did a satire of Chamberlain at the time of Munich. And then I think they were also doing satires of British prime ministers over many years. Because it was a club, he couldn't do anything about it. Now here, so think about the theatre membership. They must be shown when buying tickets at the box office. That's really important. Unfortunately, one day, an undercover police, they said, sorry, the Lord Chamberlain's department, they wanted to break the Unity, not their politics, satirizing politicians, so they would frequently send policemen to try and get in. They never did. But one night, one of them did. He claimed he'd forgotten his membership card. And although the instruction is there to always have your membership card, he'd forgotten it, and the person on the door let him in. That resulted in the Unity being taken to court because a member of the public had been able to enter the show. And Harry Landis has a great story about Alfie Bass. He comes back. Apparently, in between his statements, he was swearing Yiddish, which the judge had no idea what he was saying. Apparently, everyone was having a good time enjoying that. At the end of it, the Unity was fined £12 and 12 guineas. Bass was fined £20, but managed to quash that on appeal. The general manager was fined 12. And, excuse me, the magistrate had wanted to close the Unity. They saw this as a way of trying to close it down. But in fact, they were told they couldn't do it because that was beyond their powers. So the Unity did, in fact, survive. But that was a close call, I guess. But just while we're on the subject of membership, just to give you an idea about how things declined, in 1961, it had 750,000 affiliated members, 1,500 associates, and 450 shareholders. In 1974, so just before it burnt down, it was down to 112 individuals, 452 associates, and 31 organisations. So that had really fallen off over those 10 years. Next, the flyer for Hedda Gabler. And it's interesting, and I think it's quite an interesting depiction, really, there. And Diana from the History Club really likes this. She really liked that point in the pistol. So, where am I going? Yes. So yes. So this is just that pistol and that poise. It just gives you an idea of what's coming, really, doesn't it? So here's an excerpt from the programme. In English productions of Hedda Gabler, it usually falls into the category of sensational play about a femme fatale, But here, she is just a woman who wants freedom, but is caught fast in a bourgeois marriage, in a bourgeois society, where the only freedom she can achieve is death, and the only relief she can obtain is in exerting her power over others, a power to destroy. This is not a morbid Victorian melodrama, but a very accurate study of character and society, which contains much humour. We hope to make this plain. But, I think, that just says an awful lot about what was going on. And the other thing I think that I'd like to comment on here is, it's a play by Ibsen, sorry, not Chekhov. And one of the things that the Unity did a lot of was draw on foreign writers. So you've got Molière, Shaw, Chekhov, Brecht. They did quite a lot of first performances in English of Bertolt Brecht. And at the time of the Spanish Civil War, they were very engaged in there, doing productions about Spain. So they would always draw on these, and there's that international component to the Unity. And it included the people that came. So I've mentioned Paul Robeson. You also got Herbert Lom, who came, when the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia, he escaped them, came here, and before going on to bigger things, he performed at the Unity. I've just included this. It's part of a programme for the Seagull in 1960, but I just thought it was quite funny, because under the assistant stage managers, you've got one Mike Gambon, who actually went on to become Michael Gambon, of Harry Potter, The Singing Detective, all sorts of fame. So this is where he discovered the theatre. Apparently his dad told him to go along, and I think he was part of the Crowndale Kids Club. And he just took part in it, kept him out of trouble, I think was part of the reasoning. And from there he found his vocation. But also, I think interesting, if you look just underneath that, under lights, you've got Reg Wagland. Now, if we go back, where are we? Reg Wagland devised the Old Time Music Hall. And it's just to give you some idea about actually everybody did everything. That was the way the place worked. That, people didn't stand on their high horses or whatever. If something needed doing, they would do it. So we've talked a little bit about famous people. So here's a few of them, which I imagine you might recognise. So up the top left there, you got Michael Gambon. And then underneath him, Alfie Bass, who we've talked a lot about. Herbert Lom, who, of course, also starred in The Lady Killers, that was filmed just around here as well. Paul Robeson in the middle. Along the bottom right-hand corner there, you've got Lionel Bart. Warren Mitchell as Alf Garnett. Now, I grew up knowing Warren Mitchell as Alf Garnett. Never would I have thought that he was affiliated with, or actually very concerned with and supporting a socialist theatre like the Unity, but there he is. Bob Hoskins in the middle there, very famous. Famously for him, again, the Unity found him. Apparently he'd come to the bar, he was waiting in the bar for a mate who'd gone to an audition, and the director came out and said to him, why don't you come in and audition yourself? He got a part, and as the phrase goes, the rest is history. On the top right-hand side there, Bill Owen, who I really knew as Compo in Last of the Summer's Wine, but talking to a friend last night, apparently he was also in Carry On Sergeant. So a long and illustrious career, and he was very heavily connected with the Unity, was the original chair of the Unity Theatre Trust, in fact, and he did an awful lot. And there was quite a moving account in the Chambers book where, he said he came back from came out of the front office to see the burnt out remnants of the theatre after the fire, and how heartbreaking that was. And then finally got Harry Landis with a moustache there. I've talked to you about Harry. So, very, very grateful to him for the programmes, for having conversations. And as I say, it's an interesting chapter to have a conversation with as well. So I thought I'd end with a few then and now pictures. This is the picture which Malcolm put into the newsletter. So I thought, oh, well, yeah, I'd never seen that before. So that's actually the end of Goldington Street. And that's what it looks like now. So you've just got an iron bar gate. It's always chained up. You can't get in there. And it's always just a bit barren, really. Somewhat tidier, I guess, than in the Unity Theatre days. Then, that's the image that I used at the front. More or less looking from that direction today, that's the flats that were built on the site. Now, sadly, as you can probably see, they're starting to get a bit run down. Like one of the flats there has got a whole load of leaking coming from the window. And you look at the bins, they're overflowing, and you can't see it here, but actually there's tons of rubbish all around the bins. And I just took this photo the other day, and it was actually quite sad seeing, the condition that things were in now. But finally, the plaque again. A theatre run by the people for the people. you could maybe argue actually there's a need for that again. You know, we seem to get a lot of actors coming through the public schools these days rather than necessarily through from a working class background. So I hope you've enjoyed that and it's been interesting. And if it has piqued your interest, contact Harry Landis and you can get hold of the DVD, the Unity Theatre Story DVD, which is great fun, lasts about an hour, but a very interesting thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.